Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the live stream. Let me know if there's any audio. Like, can you hear me talking now? The last few we've done have had some audio issues at the beginning, mainly because I switched over to a new computer and still working out the kinks there. So, of course, I'm going to be taking your questions. This is a live Q&A. I'm super interested in doing this because it helps me just connect with you guys directly. So thanks so much for being here, and thank you for checking this out. So yeah, I'm your questions. My name is Justin. Obviously, they are going to be. Caesar, thank you so much. Perfect, Robert. Thank you, thank you. Any of the questions that you have, whether they're related to software development or not, I'm happy to answer questions. I want to help you guys get your projects off the ground. So even if it's related to something different like marketing or networking or how to even find an idea, those sorts of things, I'm super interested in all that as well. So feel free to go ahead and ask some questions. Chris, glad you can hear me. Vim, glad you can hear me. Awesome, perfect. I think I've got the situation set up now, and it should be working just fine. Great to have you guys here with me. Thanks for joining. I really appreciate it. So what questions do you have? I'm here to answer them for you. One of the questions I got recently was related to building a Django project that, maybe actually not a Django project, but building an app that allows users to buy apps or themes or plugins, similar to like what WordPress does. So to build something like that, it's a little bit more complicated because you're going to be integrating with somebody else's code with your service. So essentially what you do is you create an API that allows those services to run. And then that API would just interact with those services, do some tests on them to make sure that they're okay for their users. And then you just run this activation process. The technical aspect of it is, I think it's a little bit too complicated to get into here, but just generally like an app marketplace with plugins and stuff like that. There are a number of solutions out there, but you might even use something like a Docker container to make sure that the code that's being run in any given plugin is self-contained and not necessarily going to the rest of your project, whatever that might be. So Muhammad says you're an experienced Java developer, but you're trying to learn Python, Django, and Flask. So hi Mohammed, thanks for letting me know that. So I think that learning Python is going to be really easy for you coming from Java because because you already know a lot of the fundamentals of programming. So moving over to Python, I think, is going to be really easy for you. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on that. What track should you follow? We have a project called 30 Days of Python that you could check out. But I would honestly go and possibly check out Codecademy's Python track and just go through some of the basics there. And then you could probably, after you do some basics, especially with your experience level, you could probably just check out our Try Django 1.11 series so you can get all the things you need to know about Django. Because really, when you jump into something like Try Django, you want to have some familiarity with Python to some degree, but I do everything step by step and explain context. So even if you're not like fully fluent in Python, you could probably jump into that and get a lot of web applications done fairly quickly. So definitely check out Try Django 1.11 on my YouTube channel. So joincfe.com/YouTube will take you to my channel, and that's the Coding Entrepreneurs channel. So once you actually do Try Django 1.11, then you're pretty much ready for any other project in Django that we do, whether it's on our website, joincfe.com, or on our YouTube channel. Then you're pretty much ready to go because it's just a very comprehensive thing. And being that you're experienced, you will probably know how to jump into Stack Overflow and get a lot of the solutions that you might be looking for. Thanks for the question. Really appreciate it. Jarad Kohler, have you ever used joblib or pickle to serialize an object for reuse in Django? Yes. So I've definitely used pickle quite a bit. Pickle is really easy to serialize an object and then reuse it. What's your question there? like how do you do it? It's like pickle.dump, and then you put whatever you need in there, and then pickle dot either it's load or loads. I'm going blank on which you do, but pickle.load, and then load that file in. So pickle.dump, whatever it is with the file name, and then pickle.loads loads back whatever that was. So like if you have a big dictionary, it would load back that dictionary. It's pretty cool. Pickle's really useful, but I think one of the challenges with Pickle, in my opinion, I haven't used JobLib, so I'm not familiar with it, but Pickle, like, it's not super secure, right? And it's probably not the most efficient solution. So even if you had, if you have a ton of data, I probably wouldn't use Pickle. I'd probably use something else, or even just reload some of that data in Pickle, because as far as I know, Pickle's loaded into memory, and then, you know, obviously you need to have enough memory to be able to handle it. And if you add a ton of stuff to it, it might get a little challenging overall. So thanks for the question. Hopefully that answers your question. sklearn's really, really cool. It's really interesting, but again, you don't want to go over the top with pickles. Yeah. So Kyle Yan, thanks for the question. Sorry if I pronounced your names incorrectly. I'm trying really hard to get these names down, but a lot of them are ones that I just haven't seen that much of. That's why I might struggle with them. But Kyle Yan, thanks for the question. Let me know if I am pronouncing it correctly. You're currently doing your master's and you're learning Django from me, it looks like, and you're on a good with Python. What track should I move for good jobs? Like what are you looking to get good jobs with Python? First of all, I think to get any sort of good job, you want to have a pretty solid portfolio. So even if you're in school, start building like little apps that, whether they're in Python or Django or JavaScript, start building little apps that have some practical use case in your own life, in your own work, and maybe in your friends' work or even clients. Then you can have a lot more leverage when it comes to taking these good jobs. And then further, I would actually look at their job board to see what they're looking for and what experience, and try and build projects around that specifically too, so you have a better idea of how these things are going to go. Another kind of more sneaky method, which is not necessarily for everybody, but what you could do is make a podcast and ask to interview a lot of these people at these companies, not necessarily the high level senior people, but some of them at the lower level, and say, hey, I've got this podcast. I'm super interested in interviewing you. Would you be interested in coming on for 20 or 30 minutes? And I'll just pick your brain. And you'll just ask these questions, these sort of interview questions, to this person to build this sort of relationship. That will do a couple things. Number one, it's a much easier way to get in the door, at least at this time. I mean, this might change because not everyone wants to be on a podcast, and a lot of people do podcasts. But it will get you into the door. Like, they'll actually potentially even take your phone call and then sit down with you for 20 minutes, where you can literally have all the questions that you'd ever want answered about any particular job in that time. And that would be beneficial for you as well as other people. And then you'd have a better idea of what they're looking for specifically, so you can work on those skills now. Especially if you graduate in a year or 2 years, why not start doing that stuff now? These are people that you might end up working with, so getting comfortable with talking to them, and then, you know, throwing it on Skype and just recording it with call recorder. I mean, it could be really useful. Maybe it's not a popular podcast, maybe it goes nowhere, but at the end of the day, it's about building a connection with somebody and, you know, fostering some sort of long-term relationship that eventually might turn into a job. So I think those are sort of that's my advice for getting a really good job. Obviously, it takes a lot of hard work and studying, and you got to know what you are doing. But if you don't know, have that humility, admit that you don't know, and do your best to find out. I mean, I think the best answer to, like, hey, do you know this? The best answer if you don't know is like, no, I don't know, but let me go find out and I'll get right back to you. If you do that over and over again, eventually you are going to know a lot because you're actively seeking to learn more and you have that mindset. Thanks for the question. Hopefully that answers it. I know I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent, but that's that. Bernardo, are you planning work in CFE, some project about WebSockets or real-time with Django? So if I'm doing WebSockets or real-time with Django, absolutely am. I mean, I'm going to be doing stuff with Django channels to accomplish that. And Django channels 2.0 was just released, so I'm kind of still picking up the different techniques that they changed it to, as well as waiting for some bugs to be fixed before I actually jump into making a tutorial about that specifically. Because Django channels 1, I had a lot of stuff prepped and ready to go, and then I got the announcement that they were going to be bringing Django 2.0 out, and it was going to be a lot different. So I sort of put that on hold for a little while because it was going to be outdated so much quicker. If you're really interested in doing some stuff as preparation to Django channels, check out Async.io, whether it's a tutorial on YouTube, which I don't have yet, or it's somebody else's tutorial, or even just going through Async.io's tutorial. That will show you how to use asynchronous code in Django, which is something that you'll want to do with WebSockets in real time using Django. The Xcode, hey, what's up? It's a funny name. How can I know that I'm ready for Django? Like, how do you know if you're ready to learn Django? I'm assuming like some basic Python, some basic HTML, and some basic CSS. That's pretty much what you need. Then the other sides is like willingness to do it, willingness to go through some of the challenges that you'll inevitably go through. That pretty much always happens to learn anything new. So that's why I do step-by-step as well. So on Try Django 1.11, specifically, I go step-by-step with everything and give you all the context. So even if you aren't fully ready for Django, I give you as much context as I possibly can throughout there. So thanks for the question. Let me know if you need some more clarification on that. Scar, is it Scar or Scar? Thanks for the question. I work on base Python, but I don't use any advanced concepts. Can I jump into Django, or do I need to update? This is kind of related to that last question. Hopefully you heard that. No, you don't need advanced concepts for Django. I think Django is, unless you're doing like Django channels or some more advanced packages in Django, the core of Django itself is pretty straightforward as it comes to Python, as it relates to Python. And then the things that you may not know, yeah, like along the way, if you have questions, just ask them, right? Like either through me or through the channel or through your fellow, people that are learning. Ask them, or you can always go on Stack Overflow, search there. There's a lot of ways on how to do that, and I actually want you to start getting questions. Like when you learn something new, hopefully you're getting a lot of questions, or you're having a lot of questions that you need answered, because that means that you're really thinking about the material and what's going on. And it also means that you're most likely learning, because sometimes the way you phrase a question and then you have to rephrase it for clarity for somebody else to answer it, sometimes the answer is in that question. A lot of times it is. So that's something else that's pretty cool about that. So even if you're just kind of comfortable with Python, jump into Django. Do it. Why not? You have nothing to lose. If it's super frustrating and you get this feeling like you need to know more Python, then you have your answer. If you don't, then cool, you can keep going. Hello from Ukraine. Hey, from California and the United States. I'm in Southern California. I actually don't know how to pronounce your name, you from Ukraine. I don't know if you're a guy or girl. So let me know how to pronounce your name. I just don't know that alphabet, so it's difficult for me to pronounce that. But thanks, and hello. Thanks for joining us. Eduardo, what third party do you recommend to deploy Django projects? I've learned but still can't implement because it's such a headache setting up on the servers usually. So I go over this a lot actually in the live stream, so you can see in more detail on other ones. I realize it's kind of a lot to go through to actually get that detail, but I'm pretty sure in Try Django 1.11 I show you how to launch on Heroku step by step. And that's what I'd recommend is using Heroku, because Heroku is super simple. It's actually the easiest one that I've found, as long as you know how to use Git. That's Git, the version control system. As long as you know how to use that, or even the absolute basics of that, launching on Heroku is fairly easy. Now, launching on other services, yeah, it can get a little bit more complicated. So I'm curious from you as to what service you're trying to launch on. I mean, if I don't know that, then it's hard to say because sometimes it can be very complicated. Like if you're just going on an Ubuntu server and you're launching from that, and you have to install Nginx or Apache and then GUnicorn and then get your system set up with a firewall and all this stuff. Yeah, it starts to get really complicated. Heroku makes all that stuff not complicated. That's why Heroku exists, or that's why it's a platform as a service. At least that's my understanding. Big fan of Heroku. I've used it for a long time. And let's see. Kalyan, great. I think I answered your question. Please let me know if I didn't. Looks like you said thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. Manuel Perez. I believe we've chatted before. Hello, Manuel. And I believe that's how I pronounce your name, Manuel. Hi, Justin. I'd like to know what tools you use to detect when it's time to escalate your application. I'm planning to deploy to DigitalOcean or Do using Docker Swarm. Wow. Okay. So Docker Swarm, it sounds like you know how to set that up. I would just use standard logging tools as well as Google Analytics, and then you check page speeds overall. You might be able to hear my daughter. I'm not sure if you can, but you would check page speeds and then do various tests throughout the day, and then you want to check response times too. So there's a lot of tools for that. Heroku provides a lot of those tools for me, so those are the things that I end up using. I think it's like New Relic is one of those tools that I end up using for stuff like that. So consider that. I think New Relic's a good one. Google Analytics, and that's a good question. There's definitely other tools, but I know that Heroku gives a lot of those things for me, and since I use Heroku mostly, that's my best advice right now. Sorry, that's probably not a great question. That's probably a really good question for Stack Overflow. Honestly, it's like I really like it. So perhaps post it on Stack Overflow and let us know. Emmanuel, I did not answer that one in previous sessions, but thanks for the note. Chris, on a team of 2 to 5, what's the best way to work together and keep update on Codebase? So Git. Using version control is probably the best way to do it. If you're not wanting to pay for a private repository, I think bitbucket.org or .com, just do a Google search for Bitbucket. That one, I believe, still has free repositories that you can use, or you can use GitHub and pay for a private one. Like, it might be worth it for your organization from 2 to 5, especially if you're used to using GitHub. That's what I do whenever I need a team that big. The other option is and this may or may not be recommended, but it depends on what your team dynamic is. But you might have one developer that's assigning projects to all the other developers, and that one developer does the integration and make sure that everything's running smoothly. So it's not like everyone has access to all of the code. So instead, like, I give one developer an assignment to build a messaging app, and they are the ones that handle the messaging app, and then we have a repo specifically for that, and then we do our own pushes and all that without getting into too many permissions on Git, because Git actually is fairly complicated, or can be fairly complicated. Thanks for the question. Hopefully that answers it for you. Chris, you ask again, can you make some videos about Django channels? I actually just went over this, so maybe you asked it before I did. So just go back a few minutes, and that way you can see it. Kalan, thank you. You're welcome. Bernardo, thank you. You're welcome. Of course. Absolutely. Happy to answer questions. Naveed, hi. Thanks for doing this. You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Would you suggest Django for managing huge amount, billions of data, text, image, video, file as a backend API? For billions of data points, I mean, I think Django can handle it. You have to have a database that would handle it too, and a server to handle all of that information. I've actually never worked in that amount of data for a web application, But I do know that Django still runs, as far as I know, Django still runs Instagram, and they definitely have billions amount of data, like without a doubt. They have other services that work in there, but once you get into billions amount of data, that's just beyond the scope of what I know. But I would imagine it'd still hold up. But you'd probably have to have a cluster of servers to make sure that this is handling, and then some DevOps expertise to handle the load. And I mean, that's a lot of data. So I'm curious like what project you're working on. All right. The Wizzy, the Justin, or hey Justin, I know some basic Python. Great, that's awesome. Now should I start to learn data structures and algorithms, or start learning Django? As in a coding interview, mostly they see portfolio to hold in our algorithms. So you want to know if you should learn data structures or algorithms or Django. It depends on what you're trying to do, right? So if you want to work in Django, then it's probably a really good idea to learn Django. If you want to work in creating and building algorithms, you might want to focus on that, right? I would actually do what you're more interested in first. And, like if you're really interested in doing web apps, then go through that, and don't do it just for the job, right? So you should do it for interest and start building your skill set up, and then move to the next thing. So move to algorithms or data structures and just learn more and more. Or you could do both at the same time. Like day one, you do Django, day two, you do algorithms, and then you go back and forth. And it also depends on like what type of algorithms you're trying to learn. That's the other part of that. Thanks for the question. Appreciate it. Hopefully that answers it. Manuel, I pronounced your name very well. Cool. Awesome. You guys heard my daughter. Even better. Coding and having kids would be another subject for debate. Yeah, I mean, teaching kids how to code is something I'm really interested in, and I think it has become a little bit more popular to do because of how important software is to the world, right? Like let's see, what was the number? It is 7,480 million people don't know how to code right now. So like 20 million or so are doing the coding for those 7,480 million people. That's a lot of people. That's 7.4 billion, right? But I think it's cool by giving a longer number. There's so many people. So yeah, I think coding and teaching all ages how to code is becoming more and more important. My name is pronounced like Vitali. I'm a man. Nice to meet you, bud. Thanks for liking my channel. Your English seems pretty good, what you're asking right here. I was asked at the interview that was better Flask or Django. How do I answer the question? Well, I think Django's better for a couple of reasons. Number one, well, actually, no. Let me back up. They're both really good in their own right. And you use one for different reasons, right? Or you might use them for the same reason. So Django and Flask do the same thing. They both build web applications. Flask is made to build like a microservice in some cases, right? So you might build just a smaller service with Flask because it's a little bit more lightweight. Django has a lot more things built into it, so you can build a lot more right out of the box. So in some cases, if you want to move really, really fast and you don't know either one that well, you might opt for Flask. But in my case, if I want to move really fast, I would use Django because I know Django so well. Flask I don't know as well. So saying which one's better, I think in those cases, it's like, well, if you don't know either that well and you want to go fast, maybe Flask. If you want a lot out of the box, then Django. And the other side of it is the community, right? So I think Django's community is a lot bigger, like significantly bigger, as to what people are building for it, what people are supporting, the number of classes, the number of questions on Stack Overflow. So I think overall Django has a bigger community, but that doesn't mean that Flask doesn't have a big community. It just means that I think that Django's has the edge there. So, take it as you want, which one's better. I like Django better, but that's a subjective viewpoint. It's not exactly objective. But objectively, I think Django has like more stars on GitHub. It most likely has more commits. It's been around longer. You know, there's probably more questions on Stack Overflow. You know, those things are objectively true, I believe, or at least they used to be. Yeah. So that's my answer. I actually talk about this a lot. It's interesting that I get this question so often. Perhaps I need to make a video about it, talking about it more in detail, so then I can say, hey, check out that video about it, because there's a lot to it. There's more that I could talk about. So if you want more specifics, ask those specifics. Cool. Alonzo asks, I want to learn Django and connect it to MySQL. What tutorial do I have to see? I use Django 2.0. So connecting Django with MySQL is actually really easy. MySQL, you just create a database for it. And then in the Django settings module, you just write the MySQL settings. And then boom, it's connected. That's it. Like, you write your username and password and maybe even the table and how they connect to it. All of that stuff's pretty easy, and it's very well documented on the Django documentation. So that's it. Yeah. If you have more specific questions about that, let me know. But I'm pretty sure the docs on Django have that very well covered. But again, you still have to know how to create a database inside of MySQL and a user and passwords and all those permissions and stuff. So you still know how to do those things. Assuming you know how to do those things, like integrating it with Django is dead simple. It's just a matter of writing some parameters on your settings configuration folder. Although a lot of those, like a password, you might want to put in your environment variables, not in the actual Python code, to be more secure. So yeah, that's that. Okay. Manuel asks another question. What strategy to serve private files with AWS, if you ever did? So you want to have private as in like only the user can use it, right? User dependent. Yes. So what you can do is, I'm pretty sure that I have this on my blog, is AWS file upload and AWS file download. Is you put your file uploads into its own, either its own bucket or into its own directory inside of a bucket. And then you generate downloads, URLs for it on request, right? So that's what you do. You just generate the URL to be downloaded, and you run the permissions in Django or in Python. You run the permissions for that particular user to see if they can even download it. And then once you get those permissions done and checked out, okay, then you can generate that URL from either it's Bodo or Bodo 3. You can generate the URL for the file, or more specifically for the key, like the path to that file on AWS, and then you can actually return an HTTP response from Django with that URL, and that will automatically download it. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't. I mean, I realize I didn't like actually show you how to do it, but part of that is for because it gets a little bit more complicated than that, but that's generally the gist of what you would end up doing. All right. Alonzo, another question. Can I use Django with MySQL and Amazon RDS and connect it to an Android app? Yes, you absolutely can. So what you would use also is the Django REST framework to build an API, a REST API, to work with your Android app. Otherwise, yeah, you absolutely can do that. Great question. Manuel says your 3-year-old already plays with Scratch. That's awesome, Manuel. Really cool. Did you encourage that, or like how did that come about? Andrew asks, have I used Python, Kiwi, and Django? I've been asked about Kiwi a number of times. To me, it falls short when it comes to building mobile applications. I actually prefer using Ionic. Ionic is a framework that's written in Angular, so it's completely different than Python. But Kiwi, like as a GUI, it's just more challenging than I think it needs to be, especially coming from web development. like certain basic things seem to be a lot harder in Kiwi than they should be, and that was my experience a few years ago. I haven't actually touched it in a while. So yes, I've used it, but I would recommend going the Ionic route, learning Angular and TypeScript to build the front end portion of it, and then using Django's API or the Django REST framework to build a REST API to have them work together. Cool. So let's see, Alex or Ali X, excuse me, can you teach us how to hide email and secret key in production but not environment? Well, you can put it in your environment variables, and that's what you can do with Heroku, for example. You can put it in your environment variables there for your production, and just work off of that. It's different for a lot of different services, but Heroku has these environment variables and is really easy to set and really easy to change. Hopefully that answers your question. That way, so if you deploy it or push it to Git or some public repo, that would handle that stuff, as well as other passwords that you might have or any API keys. You can just put it in your environment variables and then use os.environ and grab whatever key you're working with. Cool. Manuel, perfect. I'm going to use DigitalOcean Spaces, which has the same API. Awesome. Sweet. Make it happen. Shoot, I forgot how to pronounce your name. It's Vitali. I just like you answered that interview. Now I'm using Google Translator. If there was no language barrier, I would throw you questions. Got it. Feel free to try. Yeah, there's a language barrier, but feel free to try. Cool. So let's see. Thanks for the answer, Naveed. Yes, absolutely. Anytime. Any thoughts on Celery, when to use and when not to use? Celery is really cool. So it's a task distributor. So it integrates with Redis, so you can delay tasks or even schedule tasks. Celery is cool. I've done a good amount with Celery, so you can even see some Celery videos on YouTube, as well as some blog posts on joincpa.com/blog. When not to use it would be when if you end up using Django channels, then you would probably not use Celery. They might integrate at some point, but Celery helps add some asynchronous levels to Django, where once you use Django channels, you don't need that anymore. Celery, it's just like when you want to schedule tasks or delay tasks from the main thread. So for example, if I go to a request and I want to generate some sort of file, let's say it's a CSV file and it's pretty big, that might be a really good thing for Celery. I could click generate, and then that delays the task to another process. Celery then runs that in a different work environment, not in that main process. It runs and generates that file and then emails it to the user or something. That would be a good use case of using Celery. There's a lot of other things like a scheduler too. Like instead of using cron jobs, you can schedule things through Celery to run. Like if you needed to, let's say for instance, you needed to update your email addresses or something like that on MailChimp or any sort of email newsletter thing. If you wanted to update them and you only wanted to do it, every 3 hours or something instead of instantaneously, you could use Celery for that as well. Cool. Yeah. LEX, not environment, bro. Maybe in a file. Where to store that file? So what you want, not in env, you don't want to store these keys in your environment. You want to store them in a different file. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure why you're wanting to do that specifically. Like, what are you concerned about is more the question I would pose at you. Manuel, you teach Scratch at school, and it's a nice app for the iPad he likes to play with. Awesome. So you're a teacher yourself. Is that correct? Like you teach like elementary school, or how's that working? And is it where is it? Where are you located teaching these things? Simone, maybe Simone. How do you integrate Node.js with Django? You would have to build APIs for each one to communicate with each other with those APIs. So they might be on different servers, and you have REST APIs that are working with each other. that's probably how you would end up doing it. I've never had to do it myself, so I don't know specifically, but that would be my guess. You could always check out, I'm sure there's some resource out there that does that specifically, because Instagram's well known for using Node.js for their notifications and then Django for their web application. Chris says, my Django learning experience output, my final year low budget project with REST API on Angular 2 with Raspberry Pi. Can't share that video. Oh, Chris, it sounds like you got a project that you wanted to share. Let us know in the comments of this video after it posts to YouTube. I don't know if it looks like you can't share it on the live chat. So assuming that the video's in YouTube, make sure that you have it, down in the comment area, not the chat area. Then we can take a look at it. Sorry, I guess we can't look at links on here. I think part of that is so I can just go through the chat, the comments that we have, right? I think that's part of it. Next question. Let's see. LEX, can you teach us how to parse articles into our Django site? Not RSS, but parse. So you're looking to web scrape articles and then parse them locally. Yeah, I'm actually working on a series right now specifically for that. There's already a bunch of it on jointcfe.com/courses for web scraping and figuring out how to scrape articles for all sorts of things. But actually, if you look at I can't remember the name of it, but it's a web scraping tutorial that we have on our channel. Or on my channel, there's a web scraping one, videos. It's one of the more watched video that I have. So if you do that, you can learn how to web scrape, and then you just change the URL essentially. That's basically how you do it. Hopefully that helps. If not, check out that course. I mean, it's a newer version, and it's going to have some things cleaned up. And then we're going to use Async.io to do the same thing. And this actually leads into the next question from Herberto, hopefully that's your name. What is the best way to work with asynchronous requests? Async.io, that's the best way. Yep. So that's something we're going to be covering soon. Async.io also has a requests package that it's not Python requests, but it's kind of like Python requests, so you can do HTTP requests using Async.io. It's pretty cool. Simone asks how to implement a machine learning program with your Django project or other programs. So you're most likely going to use another server specifically for your machine learned model. So when you want to make a prediction, you're going to send it to that server. You're going to send it to that server, and that server is going to send back some response. Google has a service for that. So does Amazon Web Services, where you essentially upload your machine learned model and run it. That's usually for more of the deep learning stuff. So like Keras or TensorFlow, those are the things you would use those services for. And then your Django project would just use the REST API to make those calls to those services, or using their actual APIs that they've built, their libraries, to make those calls as well. Hopefully that helps. Manuel, what email service do you use for your applications? I use SendGrid. SendGrid is the one that I use for transactional email. And then for email marketing, I use MailChimp. I'm considering moving away from MailChimp to something called ConvertKit. Nathan Barry, the founder of that, I've chatted with him a few times, and he's got a really interesting company going on there, and I might want to move over to that because just the business they're building is pretty cool. Check out some of their videos on YouTube. Convertkit, if you want to know more. They also have this cool stuff about transparency, which I like. Hi, Gaber. Have I tried NativeScript, and what do I think about it? I haven't tried NativeScript yet. I've heard some good things, but this is the thing about JavaScript and a lot of these front-end clients or client frameworks is there's so many of them, and it does get to be, sometimes it gets to be a little challenging to try and keep up with them, and then it goes back to like, what's the purpose exactly? To learn just to learn, or is it to be effective? And that's where I found myself always going back to Ionic to be the most effective when building mobile applications, because I can deploy it on iOS as well as on Android, and that's why I like Ionic so much. But native script, I've heard good things, so if you're interested in it, check it out and let me know what you think. Manuel, for some reason, your most recent message was retracted, so I'm not quite sure why. That's what it says on here. It just says it was retracted. Maybe you can see it. I cannot. So I'm not trying to skip yours. There's the question before. Good question. Native script versus Ionic. Sorry, I don't have an answer there for you. Maybe I have to look into native script more and test it out. So maybe it's actually better than Ionic, but yeah. So I think it's Vitali again. Sorry, I know I'm not pronouncing your name right. What is the biggest problem for you when looking for a newbie programmer? Like if I'm looking to hire one, or what is the biggest program? So I think I know what you're asking because you're using the translate thing. What's the biggest problem for beginning programmers? I think part of it is sticking with things. The other part of it is trying to build more advanced things too early and then getting like frustrated and too frustrated to the point where you give up. The other part is not following the syntax very well, or accidentally putting periods where there should be commas or colons. That does cause a lot of problems for beginners that causes them to give up. So more than likely, I would recommend that beginners should just stick with it. I mean, yes, it can be very challenging at times and it can be very frustrating. But one of the coolest things about software is it tells you when you do something wrong, right? So if you're learning English or you're learning Spanish or any other spoken language and you write a sentence and you're like, hey, that looks good. It might not be, right? You won't know until a native speaker looks at it, and that might, if that ever happens, that might never happen. So that's one of the coolest things about programming, but it also is one of the frustrating things is because it's telling you, nope, can't work, nope, can't work, nope, doesn't work. So realizing that and sticking with it until it works, because it's this immediate feedback loop that you're getting. And that's where if you don't give up, you try different results, right? You hit a roadblock, you try something new. You hit a roadblock, you try something new. And once you change the way you approach it, then over time, you will definitely start to become a much better programmer. And then you'll look back and go, wow, like, I've actually learned a lot, and I'm really thrilled about that. Maybe that's advice, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. AliX, where do you learn to do analytics like word count or time count, or did you come up with that yourself? Word count or time count? What are you referring to exactly? So analytics, there's things that you can learn from Google Analytics, which is a free service, on how they do things. When it comes to like word count or time count, like word count, for example, that's something that I had to do in school. Like we used to have to like sometimes there would be requirements for an essay, for example, that you would have to have a certain amount of words. So maybe that was an analytic piece that they used as quality or not. But gathering data and figuring out what data is relevant and what's not, that comes with some trial and error. And, with machine learning, with where the advancements are going in there, maybe it's better to just collect more data than less, even if you don't know what to do about it yet. So analytics themselves, like your goal should be what am I trying to accomplish here, and what can I measure to help understand if that's being accomplished, right? So, for example, like with Coding for Entrepreneurs, like I want to make sure that people are launching their projects. So a good analytic tool, which I actually don't have because I'm thinking about it right now, a good analytic tool might be, months after they finish a project, to hit them up and say, hey, did you finish a new project? What have you done? That might be a good way to analyze the effectiveness of that program, right? For sure. Or what I could also do, and what I actually do, is I analyze how much is actually being watched, right? So like on YouTube, the videos, they count a watch after I think it's 5 seconds. That counts as a view. Maybe it's 10 seconds. It might be a little bit longer than that, but it's definitely not the whole thing, right? You don't have to watch the whole thing to get a view. So one of the things that I want to encourage is have people watch the whole thing, if not watch it multiple times. So those are data points that I'm really interested in optimizing. So that means that, you know, maybe sometimes the videos being an hour long by itself is not the best idea. Maybe 3-minute videos are better. So it comes back to then testing what those things are and how they feed into that bigger picture of actually finishing watching these projects or these videos. So it's really specific to what you're trying to accomplish for the best kinds of analytics. The other side of it is just gathering all kinds of data, any sort of data point that you're thinking of, because maybe those things also feed into that bigger piece, and also using statistics or machine learning and just doing some calculations on like, wow, like the person on average, the person who watches, you know, 50 minutes a day has these criteria. Perhaps that then means, oh, maybe I need to find those people, or how do I better like assess my users to fit in that criteria so they are more likely to do that thing, right? So for example, like if let's say, for instance, a 30-year-old male watches 3 hours worth of video every day on your site, and there's, you know, maybe 20% of your audience is like that. I mean, that's actually really good. I would love to see that. I don't think that happens very often, but then perhaps you tailor your content and marketing to that person, right? So I'm a 30-year-old male, that's why I said that. Perhaps you tailor your content as well as your marketing and all your efforts to that based off of the actual data, not some sort of intuition. Hopefully that answers your question. Now, as far as doing data analysis, it's stuff that I am definitely interested in. I just have a lot of things in my pipeline right now. So I think it's called Data Camp. It's for Python and R, I believe, but they have all sorts of things in Python that you can learn from. So datacamp.com, I believe that's what it is. Really cool. They have a great service, and I do recommend you guys check that stuff out. Cool. So you guys, I'm only going to do probably about 20 more minutes of this. So it looks like I might be able to get to your questions, but if I haven't gotten to your question yet, I'm sorry. Just add to the comments in the YouTube video later. Adding those comments help other people or new people that watch the stream see those comments and maybe second them or upvote them or whatever for the next stream. And I'll try and answer some of them for the next stream as well. But it seems like this time of the day, I don't actually see as many comments later. So this time of the day is good for some of the live stream, but not necessarily for future comments. Maybe not. Maybe in the future it'll change. We'll see. Cool. So Tim asks, I have to make a simple CMS in Django for school, and I don't know how to use Django with SQLite. What CFE tutorial do you recommend? The Try Django 1.11 tutorial, that one. It's not a CMS exactly, but it's a blog thing, so you can definitely start to make CMS related things for that, or content management system, I believe is what you're referring to with CMS. Excuse me. How do you create dynamic model fields from a JSON file? What do you mean by that? I'm not, like, do you mean model fields that are generated from JSON? If you mean that, then you might just have an extra field for extra data that the JSON would come in, and you just know that field is that extra JSON, and you can treat it as such. Probably not the best solution, but it is one that would work without having to hard code the field in itself off the bat. Manuel, you are a teacher in secondary school in Spain. España, nice. Where in Spain? I've lived in Barcelona as well as Calatayud, or Barcelona as well as Calatayud. Really interested to hear where you're from. And you like to stay connected with real life projects as much as possible. You're a former IT consultant. Awesome. Really cool. So a good friend of mine a couple good friends of mine live in Calatayud currently, and I was working with her to teach Django in Spanish. It was a fun little project. It just didn't end up working out, but it is. I really like Spain. Spain's a fun country, but there's a lot of interesting things going on right now, right? So curious to hear where you're from. Let's see, Simone. Any ideas of frameworks where I can run a function on a schedule, like on a daily basis? Yeah, you can use cron, C-R-O-N, or you can use Celery, like I mentioned earlier, like year-round. Yeah. Celery or cron. Both of those things can run schedules. Or you just look for a scheduler. Like Heroku has a Heroku scheduler that you can set duration of when to run functions. You might also need to make a custom management command in Django if you want to run Django commands. So you run, you know how you can do Python manage.py migrate or Django-admin.py or Django-admin manage.py, whatever. That whatever piece is a management command, so you can build your own, like Python manage.py my command. That's what a custom command would be, and then you use that in conjunction with a scheduler that you can run those things on a regular basis using Django. If it's not Django, if you don't need Django, just run a Python command, and that's cool too, or a Python module. Cool. So Jonathan says, I've been studying Django for a while, and I'm wondering what is mandatory to become a professional Django developer, like keys and concepts to know, etc. To become a professional, you have to get paid for it, right? I mean, that's super silly, but it's true. Like, I mean, once you start being paid as a Django developer, then you are actually technically a professional Django developer. You're getting paid to develop for Django. To me, it's completing an entire project. If you can't complete an entire Django project yourself, you're still an amateur. That's what I think. Once you can complete a real one, the entire thing from front to finish, you know, registration, things like that, that is for sure a Django developer. That's what I think. To be a really good one, then you can build all sorts of projects in very little time. That's my opinion. I don't know. I'm curious what the rest of you think, especially those of you who may be professional software developers in general, if that's a good assessment of a Django professional developer. The Hunter Hall. Hey, great tutorials. Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. I'm building an Internet of Things project with Django. Can you advise on communication protocols? Yeah, so, well, I mean, if you build it through I'm assuming you're using the internet because you said the Internet of Things. So if you have the internet, you can use Django to build a local area network server and use Nginx with Django to have some sort of API that your client, whatever the client is, can read from. So I actually have a tutorial on this sort of idea specifically. I think there's a blog post related to it as well. So go to Home Baked, looked up Home Baked on joincfe.com, and you'll check out how to do some of those Internet of Things stuff with a Raspberry Pi and Django. It doesn't actually implement like buttons or sensors or anything like that. It just builds that server. But once you build that server, then you can integrate those buttons and stuff like that, and it's no problem. It works pretty well from my own tests at least. Hopefully that helps. AliX. Okay. So, AliX, can we scrape direct from our Django site automatically and put the result direct on our site? Is that possible? Right. So you want to scrape every web page so you can return results or something like that. Yes, you can do that. Of course, if you can scrape any website, you can scrape your own. And you might consider using something like Elasticsearch to do that too. I believe Elasticsearch is a good use case for that, but it might be a good idea to learn how to scrape websites anyway. Maybe not. We'll see. Hopefully that answers your question. Chris, what are and use of messaging like Rabbit and MQ? Since I've seen a tutorial about them, I can't find them out. What do you mean? What are you asking me? Like, what is a messaging service? Like Rabbit or Redis? I think that's probably what you mean. So they're kind of like event data stores. So when you use something like Reddit or Rabbit, or not Reddit, Redis or RabbitMQ, it's kind of like a stream of data. They're called messages, and this stream fires, and there's consumers to actually grab and read those. It's like a list of messages. I mean, that's what they're called, that another system can read and make use of and do something with. So in the case of Celery, I believe Celery integrates with Rabbit. Celery can send something to this Rabbit list, but at the same time listen to that Rabbit list. So when you send something, it goes back and then it does this sort of loop, if you will. And the listener or the consumer reads what that message is. It's called a message. It's not message like text message, but it's called a message. It reads what that is, consumes it, and does something with it. And that's it. And then that's kind of how these message stores work, like Rabbit or Redis. Good question. 7 community. Hey, can you teach us how to dev admin page instead of admin Django page? So how can you develop an admin page? Is that what you're asking me? Yeah. So, well, you just need to learn how to do CRUD with Django, and then you can create a mixin to have the permissions necessary for each level of CRUD, whether or not they have access to update a page or delete an item. Those sorts of things are done using create, retrieve, update, delete, right? Those views, or those generic views especially. And that's it. I mean, once you know how to do CRUD in Django, then you just add permissions, and then boom, it's now an admin page. Hopefully that makes sense. I say that a lot. I realize that in this last few times I say hopefully that makes sense a lot. Okay, so really close. I have a few more questions from you guys. Maybe about 10 more minutes. Okay, so Simone, how do I have a list for Django models? Example, say I have a list of UID for a person model. The list is parsed with the person, and the other one wants... I'm not sure what you're asking. Sorry, Simone. Please rephrase that one. Is it possible to receive and transmit video with Django? Like to stream with Django? There might be a way to do it, but you're most likely going to use a third-party service. I believe that Amazon has third-party services for streaming video through your app, and you use their service to actually do the stream, not receive and transmit. If you mean like, yeah, I believe that's what you mean. Even if it's not streaming and it's just like it's not real-time streaming like what we're doing now, and it's just like playing a video, you still probably are going to use something like AWS to send it, because it's a static file then. And Django can receive them and transmit them in a way, but they are just more or less the place that's rendering it, not so much the place that's receiving or transmitting it. Because you would use a different service, much like any other static file, you'd use a different service to make those things happen. So hopefully that answers your question. There it is again. Wow. Okay. Is it a good deal or good idea to migrate from Django REST framework to GraphQL? Since sounds good. Are you planning to make a video about it? I really like Django REST framework. I haven't used GraphQL enough to comment on it. I've played around with it just a little bit. I guess the big question is, why are you moving? Like, what particular reason does GraphQL give you that makes you want to move over to it? If it's for somebody else's project, I would ask that same question. Like, why move over to GraphQL? I don't know what that reason is. So yeah, I don't know if it makes sense to migrate over, but I mean, once you have your data set up, making a REST API is not really that complicated. So moving to a new type of API, you just have to know what the requirements are. And yeah, it should be fairly straightforward as long as all your clients know what's going on with it, as in your, the client side things, not like a person, but like a technology. Your technology clients know what's going on. Then yeah, am I planning to make a video about it? Not at this time. Maybe in the future, if I hear a lot more about GraphQL and students wanting wanting to know about it, please let me know. LEX referred to try Django 1.9. I had hard code some analytic logics like word count time. Got it. Okay, so sorry, it's been a little bit of time since I've done try Django 1.9. Yeah, hopefully I answered that question for you, but it's always nice to know that you can create your own analytics. And I think I might have made the point then, controlling your own data, I think is really, really important and potentially very, very valuable. So if you want to learn from sites like Google Analytics, that's a good place to start to see what it is that they're trying to do with their analytic tools and see how you might be able to build some of the logic in. Maybe not the user interface, but some of the logic in to your system so you can control that data and a third-party service does not, like Google Analytics. Okay, so have I used Elk? Have not used Elk. Sorry, I don't have an opinion about it. Yes, thanks for the question though, Manuel. LEX, I've never seen logic behind hard coding like that before, and I'm watching 2 to 4 hours of your videos. And sometimes you're, oh, that's awesome. Like a day is what you mean. I think that's what you mean based on the context of earlier. You've never seen analytics hard coded like that before. So that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done, right? Maybe there's more efficient ways to do it, and there probably is. Like maybe you build another service of your own microservice, if you will, that does the actual analytics side of things. But I like having them inside of my Django project and with my database, just trying to make them as efficient as possible when they are loaded. So yeah, that might be where that could be improved in try Django 1.9. I haven't looked at it in a while, so I'm not sure exactly how efficient that is right now. So maybe you use a scheduler to do the analytic parts of the analytics itself, like word count or time. Perhaps you delay that task from happening from your signal, if that's how I did it then. Okay, so the very last question will be from... I'm just gonna have to call it, guys. This is we still have a few more questions that I'm gonna just rapid fire answer. But thanks so much for being on here and checking this out. I try to do these fairly often because it's a lot of fun. It's a good way for me to interact with you guys too on a one-on-one level and answer a bunch of questions you might be having, like the ones we have here. Hopefully, you guys watch the live streams actually after they happen. I'm not sure if you do, because I realize we kind of go over the place. It's not really that structured, but there's definitely a lot of things that we discuss in it that sometimes you don't think about asking. So that's why looking at some of the older live streams might be a good thing for you. Okay, so I'm going to rapid fire these and just not say your names because you probably know who you are, and we've been talking a lot today. So what's the best way to collect data on how many users use your site? Should it be a model or updated? So yeah, you can use a model yourself, and you can use sessions specifically. So if you use sessions in a model where you basically create one specific model that handles a session, you can start to see, and you create that model when any session starts or when they log in. You can create to see how many users are actually on your site. Google Analytics also does a decent job of this. How often do you make video broadcasts, or how often do I do live? That's all going to depend on you guys, on how much we're seeing you guys show up and ask questions. So far, it's been great, so I'm planning on continuing to do it. How long will I continue doing it in the future? I have no idea, because obviously this takes away from actually building content that might help you guys, but at the same time, it helps you in a different way, and it also helps me understand where you guys are at in building things. Yeah. So when using a DRF, JSON is saved in the database, or native Python, and DRF only translates Python into JSON. I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to, but Django REST framework parses JSON data and turns that into to store it in your database, or to use inside of Python anyway. And then when you send Django REST framework, you can send it as a JSON file or an XML file. Yeah, I love Spain. Alicante, I believe. I don't know where Alicante is. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Barcelona. Oh, so you've been around. Guess you know Catalan. I do not know Catalan. I know only a little Spanish. Catalan's a little hard and is kind of funny because my friend and I were in Spain. She was speaking Spanish to them, and they would respond to her in Catalan. It's really interesting because as far as I know, most people in Barcelona know Spanish, but they respond in Catalan a lot of times. Tell me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure if that's always the case, but I found that odd, you know, because like I live in Southern California, and there's a good Mexican population here that speaks Spanish, obviously, but they also speak English. And most of the time, if you ask them a question in Spanish, they would respond to you in Spanish. If you ask them a question in English, they'll respond to you in English. It was like kind of one of the first times I've ever experienced being asked in one language and being responded to in a different. Luckily for me, since I don't know Spanish that well, those of them that knew English would respond to me in English. That was really helpful. PHP rules in Spain. It's a pity. I agree, Manuel, but maybe eventually, if there's enough of us, we'll eventually start using more Python in Spain as well, or España. Is there a way to use Facebook ads in Ionic 3? Probably. Like to have ads using Ionic 3. I'm not sure exactly what you're trying to do there, Chris. Let me know in the comments of this video later to explain more. The difference between Nginx and Apache, Heroku, and Amazon Beanstalk. Nginx and Apache, they're web servers. They're just different web servers. They accomplish roughly the same thing. They just do it in a different way. Much like Django and Flask, or Heroku and Elastic Beanstalk. They're just different. They just handle things a little bit different. Some things overlap, some things don't. It's probably not the greatest question, but that is one. Celery is a standalone framework. Yes, Celery can be used by itself with a Python module, or it can be used in Django, or it can be used in Flask. It can be used in all sorts of things. So Celery is a Python module itself. It's not a web framework. It's like Django, but it is a framework or a library, more specifically, that can do all sorts of things. It's pretty cool. And then you're going to rephrase your UID questions. All users are private. If another user has the UID of another user, they can view the user's content, kind of like followers and following, but everyone initially is private. Cool. So how do you do that exactly? Is that what you're asking me? I think you're on track of how to do it. And you can do that using models, and my TweetMe project on joincfe.com/projects, I believe has a way to show you how to do followers and all that. Thanks for the live question and answers. You're welcome. I'm glad I helped a lot. I really appreciate you guys hanging out. Manuel, much appreciated. See you later. And one last question, one book for Django. Like, do I have a recommendation for a book for Django? The 2 Scoops of Django books are great. I've actually looked at them. Danny Greenfield, I've talked to him quite a few times. He's a really cool guy, and supporting the things that he does are great as well, because he makes a lot of really good open source projects as well. So buying his book is a way to support him making more open source, and I'm all about that. And last thing, hi, thanks for your courses. They're awesome. Thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoy them. What do you think of Django from point of sale? Like using Django for a point of sale system, like as in a cash register system? If that's what you mean, then yeah, I mean, it could be really good. It's hard to say exactly what it is that you're trying to do. If you're trying to integrate it with an e-commerce site, then yeah, obviously that would be, or not obviously, but that could be really, really cool, because then you can integrate something like Electron for the desktop environment,